I feel like for me, the way I want to cook is like, I want people to like experience all the flavors. I want people to be satiated. I want people to like really like enjoy their food and know where it's coming from and taste all the flavors.
Welcome to the Private Chef podcast, serving the 1%. I'm your host, Hannes Henche, and on our show we speak to the best chefs, how they honed in on their skills to excel in the industry, and what it takes to work as a private chef for some of the most exclusive clients in the world. Welcome back to the Private Chef podcast. Today we have Kayla Simone Fowler, all the way from the West Coast, but now living on the East Coast. There's a lot to unpack, full continent experience, kind of both coasts, and deeply in the Californian lifestyle, but brought it to New York City now. So welcome to the show, Kayla.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. Where does your love for food come from?
That's a great question. It's interesting because when I was growing up, no one cooked. No one in my family really cooked. I was raised by a single mom. She was really busy. We ate a lot of like boxed pasta and, maybe some steamed vegetables here and there, but a lot of cereal, things like that. And even my grandparents, there wasn't a lot of cooking from fresh ingredients. There wasn't a lot of creativity happening. My love for food really, it really started to emerge when I was in college, actually. Essentially, the story is that I was living on my own for the first time. I was broke as all hell, as many college students are. And I kind of just needed to figure it out. I needed to figure out how to feed myself on a budget. And I had a roommate at the time who started a garden. And so we started experimenting with fresh produce. We would, go to the co-ops. We would go to the food bank. We would even dumpster dive. We would sort of find food wherever we could. And we'd bring it home and we would just sort of experiment and get creative. And that's really where I started cooking and realize that's when I really realized actually food is an art. Food is a discipline. Food is something that I can really learn about and a skill and an art that I can hone. I have a lot of other artistic pursuits in my life that I've done. I've always been sort of a creative person. I dance still. I've always loved music. I've done writing. I've done theater. So this sort of new artistic medium, when it presented itself to me, it just sort of I sort of took to it naturally. And I started reading cookbooks as if they were novels. It just sort of became an interest and a passion and a hobby, really. And, just learning about what's in season when, and just really learning about the art and science that is cooking, sort of the alchemy of it all. So that was when I was about 19, 20. And yeah, the rest is kind of history.
As they say. Because
I ended up getting, as they say, exactly. My first cooking job was when I was 19 in the kitchen of a summer camp for kids. And so I spent 3 months cooking for 200, I think it was about 200 children and maybe 20, 30 adults, all summer long. It's a hard job, let me tell you. But that was my first cooking job. Yeah.
How did you end up there? What?
Yeah, how did I end up there? It was a family friend. So this was actually a summer camp that I had been to. It's in Vermont, in New England.
That sounds nice.
And it's a farm camp. Yeah, it's actually a really beautiful and amazing place. It's a working farm. So there's animals, there's giant, I guess, crops. It's, just like a giant garden, and not all, but like a significant amount of the food that the campers eat is, like from the land. And
that
even
that
some of the
vastly
animals
changed the narrative
get
of the
butchered every year.
experience. Like going
Yes.
from a camp
Yeah.
kitchen
Yeah.
to a camp kitchen that has their own farm kind of garden. That's a very different story suddenly. That sounds
Yeah.
very intriguing,
It is. Yeah. It's fantastic. So I guess if I can like backtrack a little, like, when I talk about my love of food really starting when I was like in my 20s, like in college, that experience at a farm camp was significant as well. So I went to that camp when I was about 16, and, I'm a city kid. I grew up in Oakland, California, right next to San Francisco. There's some nature, there's some forests, but like I hadn't really ever seen like a farm. I didn't really know what that meant. But when I went to this summer camp, my friend's mom, it was a friend of my mother. She had been sending her children, and she thought, I think Kayla would really like this place. I'm not sure why she thought that, but she was right. She paid for me to go. She sent me. And I went, and it was sort of life-changing because I remember feeling like I didn't know places like this existed, where we're just out in the middle of nowhere. There's like food that we can eat, like right next to us, like right next to where we're sleeping, and we can go take lettuce from the garden, bring it in, and make a salad for lunch. Like the bacon that we're eating this morning is from like a hog that was slaughtered last year. On this property. It was definitely like, there was a bit of an awakening, I think, that happened there. And just like, I think for the first time I realized like the connection between like food that ends up on your plate and like the journey that it took to get there. Like where did this carrot come from? Like how did it end up on my plate that I'm now eating it?
Did you ever...
So then working later... Go ahead.
Did you ever question that before? Like, where does the milk come from? Or, like, where does the bacon come from? Was that part of... Because I do know a couple of friends from the city themselves, or actually we had an exchange student too here once, and he's never in his life, and he was from Japan, he's never in his life seen a cow before. And then he was here and he saw a cow. And it is like... And I wonder what that was like for you, and what did you know about the journey of food before you went there?
Not much. I don't think I gave it much thought, especially when you're a kid. You take so much for granted. All you know is that like there's pasta in your cabinet at home, and you don't really know like, okay, well, actually that comes from a plant, which is wheat. And that wheat is grown by someone, harvested, sent to a plant, processed in a particular way. And then it travels however many thousands of miles between the processing and then like the packaging and then putting it in a store. I don't think I even had any concept of that. Like I just had nothing in my life had happened that made me wonder until I went to that farm camp. Yeah. When really for the first time, I think I put together like, oh, so like chicken is a chicken. It's an animal. And this is what happens to make it, the product that you then have on your plate. An experience I had actually when I was at the camp as a camper. So I was 15, I think I was 16 years old. We had an opportunity to slaughter the chickens. And it was totally optional, do it if you want to do it, don't if you don't, because it's a lot, obviously. Yeah. And I decided to do it because I ate chicken. I was actually raised mostly vegetarian. Like my mother is still vegetarian. She just didn't really cook meat for us much. My aunt is actually vegan and has been for a really long time. But I did eat chicken. I ate it occasionally, and as a little 16-year-old, even I felt like, this is something that I eat and I should really experience the process. I should really do this. So I went, and a friend of mine and I, we cut its head off, and we did the whole process of like boiling it and doing the feathers. And I was crying. Whoa. It was very emotional, the taking of a life was just so, it was big. I totally didn't mean to like start talking about this with you.
Go ahead.
But here we are.
Keep going.
It was, and then, a few, I think it was maybe like a week later, we had so the chickens, essentially, we were slaughtering them for this event that we were doing at the camp, which is just like the farm dinner, where basically everything we ate that dinner was from the farm. And, we spent weeks preparing for it, and harvesting, processing, pickling. We made cheese. We made paneer. And and I remember sitting down at that farm dinner and eating the chicken that I myself had slaughtered. And it was sobering. I think maybe that's like the best word for it. Just very sobering. I still eat meat today. I don't eat a lot of meat, but for me, it's more of like a health thing. Like I feel a lot better when I do eat meat, but I definitely think a lot more about what it is I'm eating. What was that animal's life like? Where is this processing taking place? Like, I feel like I just feel much more in touch with like what it means to eat meat. Because of that. Yeah. And I feel like I'm more conscious of it. And even eggs and dairy production, just sort of like what that entails, especially on such a large scale, like an industrial scale. So I'm very grateful for that experience, actually.
Yeah.
Most people don't get that. So I feel happy that I got that.
I think I don't want to force it on anybody, but maybe the way it was done with you is like, hey, this is a choice. I remember the first time that I was involved in taking an animal's life for slaughtering, and it didn't feel like the right thing to do as such. Like it felt, for me, I was young, a similar age probably like you. I mean, I was around it for my entire childhood already, but the first time I actually did it, I was probably maybe like a year younger than you when you had that experience. And it felt a bit sobering, just like you. It wasn't like, and then I was always looking at it with a different light. I think it's definitely something that people have to overcome, and then maybe you get used to it. But I don't know. I'm glad I did it because I know the price of everything that's on the plate for my clients, but at the same time, I find it very interesting. There's some people who want nothing to do with it. For them, this part of the journey of their food needs to be as far remote as possible. Like it just can't even be mentioned because then they won't eat it.
Yeah. And I understand that, like intellectually, because it is a lot. It's emotional, and but yeah, I can't help but feel like ideally we would all be way more connected to what we're eating, how it got to us. And this doesn't even just apply to meat. This also applies to vegetables, the way they're grown, who's harvesting them, how are those people paid, how are they treated? Just like you said, like what's the cost? Not just financial cost. What is like the human cost? What's like what's the transportation cost? How far are these vegetables traveling? Someone is paid to, drive them across the country. What happens when they're in transit? How much nutrients is, it's like it on and on and on, especially in our American food system, which is so based on, trucking, things being grown en masse, like, monocropping. and then being harvested by people who are, not paid a living wage. And those people are sort of invisible, in our food system, in our food cycle. And then being processed in such a way, packaged, and the cost is so much higher, really, than us just going to the store and paying a few dollars. This is something I'm actually very passionate about. And who gets subsidies and who doesn't, and why is some food cheaper than other food? And I think it's so complex and it's so deep that I know a lot of people just aren't aware, just aren't informed about these issues, because it's kind of like behind the scenes, it's you kind of have to dig for this information. But nothing like working on a farm or in a butcher shop, as you mentioned, to really get a feel for like what it actually means to eat, like as a human. What does it mean to be fed? Yeah, and how does that all happen?
Yeah, I'm very glad that. So the experience I had, the family business we have or had, is it's very close to the sustainable model that people probably would like to have. Like the beef, the actual animals, they live probably, I think it's like less than 20 miles from our place, and it's the same. So my dad has personal relationships with the farmers and everybody involved, and he knows what they're being fed, and so in that sense, it's all there, and I've always appreciated that. But the interesting thing is it's just not on people's mind. Most people that buy meat, they don't have it on their mind. What was the animal fed, or how was it treated, or how were the people treated that were part of that journey? And I haven't visited a slaughtering house in the United States, besides a couple smaller ones from our vendors, but I haven't went to the big ones. But I've been to a big one here in Germany, in Munich, and in one shift they killed 700 animals, and it was like I don't think the animals nor the people in that system got treated well. All of them were laborers from Eastern Europe that thought they could make a little bit more money by being here. They would be here only for 3 months, and then they would be put back on a bus and sent back to Eastern Europe. And that's a price to the food system that most people are not aware of. And it's hard to make that. Obviously, if you go to a supermarket chain and you purchase, it's not part of it. It's not part of the label in any way. Obviously, why would they put that on there? Just discourage people to buy it. And I think Whole Foods tried to do it a little bit, with the animal welfare scale. But I think ultimately, unless you build relationships, and I think farmers markets are great places, and I guess Vermont is one of those places. They have that culture of small farms, and there are certain areas in the US that care more about it. And I was part of consulting a restaurant that wanted to become more sustainable. And one of the things I noticed is that the term local means two completely different things. Like in the United States, sometimes they write local, and it's like 250 miles. Sometimes it's 500 miles. If I take that range here in Germany, I'm in like a whole set of Europe. I'm in like France, I'm in Belgium, I'm in like a couple other different countries. And
you're in a different country, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that standard seemed like, I'm like, oh, that doesn't really reflect local for European understanding. But then at the same time, I also understand the dimension of the US. And I don't know. You've looked into that deeply, and I'm sure you're aware that a lot of the stuff gets trucked over from California to the East Coast, especially now. It's a cold season of the year, and it's all coming from the West Coast or South.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that actually so I'm a private chef, but so in my like practice, I guess you could call it, or in my life as a private chef, I try to be as like deeply committed to seasonal, like local and seasonal as I possibly can in a place like New York City. Because obviously there are limits, you know, when you're feeding people and you're feeding them what they want to eat. Obviously, like some corners have to be cut, but there's nothing like, you know, going to the farmer's market and just looking around and seeing like, okay, what are the people within, you know, 100, 200 miles? What are they growing right now? And, you know, planning menus around that. I mean, I think it's better for the planet. It's better for the food system. It's better for us. Like, I think without getting too woo woo, you know, I think like we're human animals. Like we are designed to also function in like alongside the cycles of nature. And, you know, it's no, like for instance, it's, you know, it's no mystery why, for instance, in fall, things like, you know, sweeter squashes and yams and more sort of calorically dense, starchy foods start to come into season because, well, winter's coming and, you know, you can't grow much in winter and you can't forage and like hunt much in winter. So, you know, that's our bodies preparing for like this cold season when food isn't quite as abundant. I mean, it all just makes sense. Like we're connected with it, whether we know it or not, whether we want to be or not. And yeah, this is a bit of an aside, but it's interesting when I have clients who are, you know, keto or, you know, want to eat in these sort of like specific diet ways. And I have so many feelings about, about all of that. But, you know, like when I have clients who like don't want to eat potatoes, but like when it's potato season, like you gotta eat potatoes. There's like a reason, you know, there's like a reason why potatoes are in season right now and why our bodies crave these like heavier, starchier foods. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like I'll respect like your like dietary preferences, but a little part of me is like, it's just like, doesn't make sense, but okay. Like that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny to find the balance between like my sort of like value system when it comes to food and what clients are wanting and what they're asking for. So it's always like a balancing act. And ideally you'll find people who, you know, where it's a bit of a match. I'm actually very lucky. The client that I have right now, I work for one family right now, and they are, I would say, as close as possible to me in terms of like values and like value systems around food. They want, you know, organic, pasture raised everything. They're very aware of, you know, where the meat is coming from, where the fish is coming from, how fresh it is. And, you know, and also like the seasonal, you know, they're down basically when I'm creating like very seasonally focused menus. Like they're up for it. They're not asking for cauliflower in May, like things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been like a joy to feel like I get to kind of do what I want and what I love, and keep clients happy as well. Yeah.
You know, that's, are you familiar with the Ikigai concept? So one part of it is, it's like the Japanese art of a fulfilled life. And it has 4 pillars. And 2 of them are, you do something that you love to do, and you do something that is needed. And I think what you just said is having the family that appreciates what you naturally love to do, you know, it kind of comes together. And I think it's such an interesting component for private chefs to explore that for themselves. And I think initially we don't yet know really, so we kind of get our first family and we work with them, but it might or might not be a good sync. And eventually we kind of like, okay, this is who I am in my life, in my authenticity. And then once we kind of know that, when it's time to interview with someone, we can actually interview both ways, and we can be like, hey, I understand this is what you want. This is who I am. We might or might not be a good fit. And then And I always encourage chefs to be fine with turning down families too, because if it's obviously an off-fit, I give you a simple example, is a family that's asking for white glove service and you're somebody who loves to do family style. Yeah, just choose a different family. Or as you said, if you are all about grass-fed meats and everything, and you have somebody who wants you to go to the cheapest supermarket in town, you might just want to pass. And I actually love that, because I do think there's enough work and there's enough families, and there's more families becoming more conscious, I would say. I think that the tide is kind of shifting. There's a lot of interest in what you're doing. So I think there's a place to do that. And I'm glad that you have such a natural fit, because I think that's like one of the most beautiful things for us being private chefs, to have that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I completely agree. There is a lot of work, especially in a place like New York City, in a major metropolitan area. There's a lot of work, and there are a lot of chefs, and, a family who, wants meal prep, but, is very cost conscious and wants you to, as you said, like go to a cheaper supermarket, get, sort of, the like economical cuts of meat and things. Like, there is a chef out there for you who will do that. And it's not me. And that's like nothing personal. It's like at all. Yeah. I feel like, for me, I am so grateful right now that I'm in a place in my career. So I've lived in New York 3.5 years. I moved here to go fully freelance as a private chef. And I'm so grateful that in 3.5 years, I have arrived at a place where not only have I sort of found this client that is such a good match, but also that I have the privilege now to turn down work if I feel like it's not a good match, to pass on something if it's not a good match for me, time-wise, financially, and style. Because for a long time when I was first getting started, I was doing a lot of meal prep gigs. There's a lot of that here. And I started to realize that so many people who wanted meal prep, some of them are just, busy families who don't have time. Some of them, wanted to eat, healthier, more sustainably, like et cetera, but didn't have, the time and the energy to do it themselves. But a lot of people wanted to lose weight. And a lot of people were doing meal prep because they were on some sort of fad diet. They wanted someone to help them count calories. And I took those jobs for a long time because I needed the work. And I reached a point, I don't remember exactly when it was, probably like a little over a year ago, I think, when I decided I'm done with that. I'm not going to do that anymore. Because it's actually very against my own sort of personal, like the way that I want to cook and the way that I want to feed people is not in a calorie counted, condensed, mode where you're just eating because you want to control the size and shape of your body. Like, I feel like for me, the way I want to cook is like, I want people to experience all the flavors. I want people to be satiated. I want people to really enjoy their food and know where it's coming from and taste all the flavors and maybe we'll have some Indonesian flavors, maybe some, Moroccan flavors. It's all kind of about big and having big experiences, big appetites. That's sort of my philosophy. And so when I meet someone who wants me to cook them, keto meals under 1,200 calories a day, I'm just it's like taking my kind of creative, artistic, culinary art and trying to just shrink it into this little box. And yeah, after a while, I just, I got to a point where I had enough work, I had enough exposure and things like that, where I got to say okay, I'm going to put that aside now, because now I'm going to only, cook for people who are a little more like aligned with like what I want to do. And on my Instagram, and I took meal prep off my website as well as like an offering that I had. I removed it, and I made like a little announcement on my Instagram too, where I just said like too many people who yeah, I just said like, you know, there's most of the meal prep inquiries I get are for people who want to lose weight. And just like we mentioned earlier, like there are plenty of like weight loss, like diet, like clean eating, whatever. There are plenty of chefs in New York out there who do that. And like absolutely no shade to them. They're filling a niche. Like it's wonderful. And like they are for you. That's a good match. Those chefs and those clients, like that's great. I do something else. And it was really empowering, actually, like to be able to do that and to feel like, yeah, because like I'm not just a chef, but I'm also like, I mean, culinary is also such like a kind of an artistic discipline, and you wouldn't want like a sculptor to start trying to be a painter for whatever reason. I don't know. That sounds kind of like weird and like elitist when I say it like that, but it's true. You know, I do this because I love it. And you know, I came into the culinary world fully like on passion alone. Like I did not plan to be a chef. I did not go to culinary school. I got where I am fully because like it was just something I loved to do and was so naturally drawn toward. And eventually opportunity one came, opportunity two came, and I just sort of, and it sort of all happened like organically. Yeah, so it's truly like I'm in food because I love food and I love what I do. And it feels really good to not have to, like compromise, I guess, anymore. And I just wish that for everyone, you know, I wish that, because it's true. Like there's a peg for every hole or whatever. There's someone for everyone. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You know, I truly think that, and I don't think it's like straightforward, but it's like what you said. You had enough exposure to know what you want, and you know where you stand in your power. And I'm so glad that you were like, okay, this is not for me anymore. I'm doing this because this is where my home is. This is what I want to do. And I think if people have that opportunity or also the guts to do that, we would ultimately live in a better society overall. Because, you know, people that love what they're doing, they will naturally excel at it. They will naturally do a better service, and you know, they will also go home satisfied and happy. You know, rather than just doing something for the sake of it, or because the sunk cost of it is all like they're 10 years into their career. They're like, oh, but I did all of that. And I don't want to, you know, lose any of the investments I made on this career path and start from scratch. But I think if people were to pursue more of what they love, it would just make a better place. Like if I see how you speak about food and cooking, and I've had a couple other interviews where I could like see how people like wholeheartedly love their job, you know, and especially one interview I had with Cindy. She's from working in Nevada right now, and she left the banking career, and she couldn't be happier, you know, and she's a private chef and she's having the time of her life, and I love that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great story. I love that. And I completely agree. Yeah, I think there's so many different parts of like my career and my life where I tell people like, yeah, I don't really know if I would like recommend doing it the way I did. Cause it's always been kind of like, I'm taking this big chance. I'm taking this huge leap. A lot of it's like not, you know, it's not like I studied for years and planned this career trajectory, which is the way a lot of people do it. That's more of sort of like a secure, like, okay, I'm on this track, I know what I'm doing. And like, that is just not how I have like lived my life at all. And yeah, so I always tell people like, I don't know if I'd like recommend doing what I did, but like, it sure worked for me. And yeah, one of the things that truly just getting into culinary. Like my first head chef job was, believe it or not, as the head chef of a sorority at UC Berkeley. You know what sororities are, right? Yeah. I don't know if they have them I imagine they don't have them in Europe, but yeah. But
actually, we do have in some odd places we do.
Oh, really? So they're ubiquitous here, and like every university except the university I went to, oddly enough. It's funny because the college that I went to, my degree is not food related at all. The college I went to does not have sororities and fraternities. And I went there, I did that on purpose. I did not want to be around that. Like I didn't want to be around like Greek life. And then fast forward however many years later, and I'm working as the head chef at a sorority. When I applied for that job, apparently I was one of 6 applicants. I was the only one who had not been to culinary school. I was the youngest, like by far. I was 25. And I had, like on paper, like my resume, like I was not qualified to do that job.
So why did they give it to you?
Yeah, truly. That's a great question. What they told me is that one of the things that I had to do for the interview was I had to write like a 2-week menu, like a meal plan, like menu for kind of to show them kind of what my style was, what my vision was. And they said that they like loved it. And so they kind of took a chance on me, and I kind of took a chance on them too, because I was essentially going from, having only been essentially like a line cook, never having been like in charge of a kitchen, to being in charge of this kitchen where we serve 100 to 150 women twice a day, every day. Me and a sous chef, that's it. Huge leap, huge job. And I wasn't even sure if I wanted to be a chef at that point. I knew that I like loved cooking and had been doing it, like here and there. I had summer jobs cooking, but I knew I loved it, but I didn't know if that was like my career. But I was like, let's try it. Let's just try it. And I was there for 6 years. I loved it. I completely fell in love with it. And the first couple months it was a learning curve for sure. I was working like 70-hour weeks, just, trying to get the hang of, it's not just menu planning and cooking at such a high volume with such a small staff. It's also inventory, vendor relations, doing the ordering, keeping track of, kitchen repairs and maintenance, like everything that a chef does. I learned it. Like I just had to learn it in like a couple months. And, but what drew me to that job was the freedom, like the creative freedom. Like when they told me that I was going to be able to write all my own menus, and source pretty much from wherever I wanted. Within the budget, I was like sold. Like I would love to like write 10 menus a week. Like that would be so amazing. Like, I want to do Italian food. I want to do South American food. I want to do Central American food. I want to do Southeast Asian. Like I just had all these like big ideas, and, and it was honestly a fantastic job, and I loved it. And like, heads up to anyone out there who's ever thought about like potentially being like a sorority or fraternity chef. It's actually like kind of the best. It's secretly like a wonderful job because you work, essentially 9 to 5, no weekends, no holidays. You get summers off. Often they're paid, not always, but often they're paid. You get full creative control over the menu. And, a lot of the sorority that I worked at, the women were just, they were wonderful. So smart, so appreciative. They loved what I did. It was a good match also in that way that we've been talking about. Cause, I was a young woman living in the Bay Area. They were young women living in the Bay Area. I kind of like knew sort of what that demographic likes to eat. And I like to eat it too. So I just kind of made what I wanted, and they ate it up. Literally.
Sounds like a perfect match.
Yeah, it's actually like a fantastic job. So it was a really good match. And it also really helped me find and hone my style the way we've been talking about it. Like I love global cuisines. I feel like I'm always learning about different techniques and ingredients and dishes from like all corners of the globe. And a lot of these women were like, adventurous enough to let me try, like Northern Thai food and, East African food. Like, I mean, like bless their hearts. they let me just like they let me kind of go crazy. And then I also did like, pizza and burgers. Like we did that too. But sometimes we would do, instead of just like burgers, it would be like turkey burgers with like manchego and green chilies and saffron aioli. And they were like, great, let's do it. I just got to like play kind of for 6 years. And I think it also helped me really.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it also helped me sort of find what sets me apart, like from other chefs. I remember like one of the greatest compliments I've ever gotten was actually from a woman who came from another sorority house to eat lunch with her friend who was in the house. And the two of them actually came into the kitchen after lunch. And the woman who was living in the house said, like, you just have to hear what my friend said, like, about your cooking. And the woman said, like, yeah, I live in a house down the street and, our food is good or it's fine, whatever. But I just had to tell you that, like, your food tastes like you can taste the love in it. Like, you can tell that, like, you really care about, like, the food and how you make it and, like, you care about these girls. And she just said, like, yeah, you can really, like, taste the love. And that just, like, I mean, I don't know how many years ago that was, but that has, like, really stuck with me. And I feel like that has been kind of like a through line in my career as well, that like, I think that's like what sets some chefs apart is like, you can just taste the love, the intention, like the care. You can taste how much they love what they do. And so that has also really helped me kind of form my sort of like philosophy, my cooking philosophy and the way I like try to do things. But you were going to say something. Sorry, go ahead.
I was actually going the same direction because I feel like the students will notice, whoever is there, whoever lives there, they know the difference because most places you don't have that kind of passionate person there. You will have somebody who's like, okay, this is my budget. This is how I get this done within a certain amount of time. That's like the least frictional for me. And, I don't get fired. It's like, and I think that's true for more places than what you did at that place. And I think that's why people were super appreciative. And I mean, you got the credit for it, which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It ended up being just like such a mutually beneficial and sort of like appreciative relationship for as long as I was there. Because I do think, I mean, truly, you can taste the love, you can taste the difference. And I also think these women expressed that to me, and that was, it's a unique experience. I think, I don't come from the restaurant world. And I think a lot of chefs that do, you don't get that kind of feedback. And you don't have that relationship with the people who are eating your food. A lot of times you never even meet them. You have no interaction with them. And so I think it's just sort of a different way of like developing a culinary philosophy. And, I used to have sort of a chip on my shoulder about, the fact that I don't come from restaurants. I didn't go to school. And for a long time, I did not consider myself a chef because I was getting so many messages from everywhere, like from the culinary world, from the media, from everywhere, that like, that's what makes a chef. is if you're classically trained, if you come up in this sort of lineage of like Michelin restaurants, if you work your way up. And I didn't do that. So I remember I used to sort of quantify when I told people what I did. I said, oh, well, I'm the head chef at a sorority, but I'm not like a real chef. Like I would say that. And after a few years, some of my friends luckily told me like, you really should stop saying that, because like, of course you're a chef. Like, you do everything that chefs do. You plan, you cook, you do inventory, you do ordering. And after a while, I was like, yeah, I do. I'm going to sort of try to sort of reclaim reclaim this and take it back and feel like there's not just one way to be a chef. This is something I spend a lot of time like thinking about and talking about, is like, who gets that title chef and who doesn't. And in some ways, even after I moved to New York and tried to, sort of get my feet wet here, when I was working in catering, like, before I had like full-time, private employment, I feel like I had to fight in a lot of ways for my right to that title, because most people who are working in that world who have gotten to that level had a completely different, trajectory than I did. And, in their eyes, I'm just like, I've just been fucking around for the last like 7-8 years. Like, what have I even been doing? Can I swear? Sorry.
Yes, of course.
I didn't even think about it. But, yeah. And a lot of people I think really didn't take me seriously and, didn't think of me as a chef, and I was denied a lot of opportunities. And, yeah. And that's been a big part of also my kind of like career trajectory also, is like, there's so many different ways to be a chef. Like, it's time that we break out of this mold, that only people who did this very specific track can claim that title. Most of them are white men, most of them who have the ability, the funds to go to school, and, who will get promoted in Michelin restaurants. They're mostly white men, so, white women also, but like it's, that has historically been what a chef is. And I just think it's time to change that narrative because like, I think like I am a chef. I am like, I have,
you are.
Food is like my biggest joy in life. Yeah. And I've done everything that like a restaurant chef has to do. And, yeah. And I think I'm about to go to Mexico next week, and I'm taking a cooking class with, this woman she's just like a grandma on the island of Isla Mujeres outside of Cancun. And
that sounds amazing.
She's been cooking her whole life, and now she teaches people, and I'm so excited. I can't wait. We're making some, like traditional Mayan, recipes. I'm like, very excited. But I think like, why is that woman not a chef? That woman is an expert in her craft, in her area of like cuisine, but like by many standards, by Michelin standards, that woman is not a chef. And I just think that's so wrong. Like, obviously I have a lot of feelings about this. You can tell.
See, I interesting enough, I'm probably closer to what you described in the first place. And, I'm a white man, and I spent the first 7 years of my career in only Michelin star restaurants. And I climbed up the ranks. Mm-hmm. It's very traditional. I didn't go to the culinary school in the US, so I didn't have to pay for it. In Germany, it's paid for while I'm working at the same time. So it wasn't about money.
Wow. Yeah.
But I do think there's a big place for people like you in our industry. And the more private chefs I speak to, the more I learn that the trajectory, I haven't spoken to people that actually have the same trajectory. Some have my experience in terms of the restaurants that start, but everybody has their own journey. And I find that so refreshing. And I think somebody who's as passionate as you are and has such rich experience and diverse experience and is actively seeking out those culinary experiences, like going to Mexico now and really hone in, I think just forget about the title and stand in your own right, stand in your own power. You know, you have so much experience that you have to share and the love that you're bringing to the table. And whether you earn someone's title or not doesn't matter. And that's one of the things that about like this whole Michelin star thing. A friend of mine is really eager and he has the potential to do it, to have a Michelin star in his own right. And I always remind him that, you know, it's just other people's approval that doesn't make you a better chef or not. Like whatever, just stand in your own right. If people appreciate what you're doing, great. And, you know, if you have the skill set, and you do, you know, you will find people that will appreciate you. And it might not be with public accolades and titles from some old French guys, you know.
A tire company. From a tire company.
Yeah, literally from a tire. So in that sense, I think that, like, I give you an example of, so the mother of one of my friends, she's from Brazil. She's an amazing cook. Probably you can call her chef, but she has no formal education whatsoever. But she's been cooking for people in their houses for decades. She knows how to make everybody in the room lick their fingers, you know, like, and that's just amazing. And I think, especially in our industry, there is a place for people like that. And some households, they want it very formal. And they might pick someone that has a different trajectory, maybe like some of my friends that come from the, you know, traditional kind of cohort in the restaurants. But I think that's the beauty about our industry is once you find a family that appreciates what you bring to the table, it can still be a match in heaven. And it's not about what happens elsewhere, you know, and I think that's a beautiful piece. And that's why I encourage people to really take your time finding that family, or as you said, seek that exposure, you know, because once you're there, it just feels right.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said about it's not what happened. It's not what has happened like before or like outside of the kitchen. Like it's what's happening within the household right then, you know? Yeah. I also think that, you know, I've heard some people say like, oh, you know, chefs are made, not born. And sometimes I understand where that comes from, but part of me also wants to think like, but there's some things that make like a great chef or a great, like, you know, home cook, like your friend's mom, that like can't be taught. I don't know. You know, I think there are some people who just are born with that,
being
that
loving.
Like hunger for learning, that, being loving, wanting to like wanting to put your heart and soul into the food and also like wanting to constantly learn, wanting to constantly be creative, having attention to detail, and also like those soft skills that a lot of time that like you sort of need to be in the private world, like being affable, being friendly, being able to be around pets and children. And there's some things, I think some things kind of can't be taught. I think there are some just like inborn qualities that like would take a good chef to a great chef, if you know what I mean. Like I don't know if like, you know, culinary school and like a Michelin trajectory can teach you how to have like a constant hunger for learning. I think some people just naturally have that, and then either they go that sort of more traditional track or they don't. I
actually think being loving and nurturing far outshines being an amazing chef in our industry.
I agree.
And I wouldn't even, and then after that I would put the soft skills and then the cooking. Because The people that are complete
I like
nuts, but know how to cook, but have no soft skills and, you know, no warmth, they're not made for our industry. They can go to restaurants and, you know, behave whichever way they want to behave in there and be the biggest guy in that environment. And then they can put their own name on the door and then they can get the public accolades, but they won't last in the private industry.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I think you're right. Like, I mean, there's something so primal and like instinctual about what it means to be fed by someone else. And I mean, it reminds us of our moms or whoever our primary caregivers were. It's like, you know, I mean, cooking and eating like with someone else or cooking for someone, being fed by someone, that's something that like humans have been experiencing since like the cave days. And I really do think that like, yeah, if there's no like love in it, if you can't feel that love, it just like, it's just not like the same. Yeah, I think that's really like the number one ingredient in, I agree with you, in being like a good private chef. Are you someone that people want in their home? Like, are you someone that people feel comfortable around? Are you someone who like people feel fed by, not just from like the food, but also kind of like energetically, like bringing that sort of like that warmth, that generosity. It's really true. There's this story that I love that I tell sometimes, which is, it comes from this novel by, I don't know if she's Mexican or somewhere in Central America, but there's a novel called Como agua para chocolate, like water for chocolate. And there's a story in it where the protagonist, I think she broke up with her boyfriend. She can't be with her boyfriend, something like that. So she's working for a family. She's cooking them dinner and she's crying because she's so sad and like heartbroken. And, you know, they put everything together. They serve the meal to the clients and they all start crying because there's tears in the food. And I just love that as a metaphor for like, you really put yourself in the food. And it's so much more than just the ingredients and the elements and the techniques. It's really you, and it's like who you are that is feeding people.
You know, my wife said this morning or yesterday maybe, she said she doesn't want to eat food from angry people anymore. And then I told her, I'm like, you probably can't eat in the majority of kitchens in the West.
Yeah.
Because when I think about especially professional kitchens, especially on that level, I'm like, almost all of them are tense at the bare minimum, if not anxious, if not angry, you know, like there's not that many places left you can eat at, you know. And I'm not sure, are you familiar with Divia's Kitchen on First Avenue?
But yeah. Is it Divia's? D-I-V-Y?
Divia's Kitchen on First Avenue. It's like right off Houston Street.
I don't think so.
And it's the whole thing is like a kind of like a spiritual center, and you can do breath work and yoga upstairs, and there's like different musical programs and stuff. And then on the lower level, they have like a Ayurvedic based cuisine. And you know, I always feel like eating there just feels so nurtured, like, and you can I think it's a couple that runs it, and the lady is the chef, and she comes out occasionally and serves some of the meals, and you can just tell the difference of what that environment is like, and you know how they're intentionally serving the food. You know, there's just a different level of care. It's not just being banged out like in other restaurants in New York City. You know, it's not a bunch of angry alcoholics in the back.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just doing the rote thing, you know, so how many more hours till I'm off? Like, oh, I've made this sauce so many times. Oh, I'm so tired, you know, and like, I'm tired. I'm not making enough money. Like, I'm stressed. I want to go home. You're really right about that. I'm gonna write that down. I want to go there.
Yeah, you should absolutely go there.
But that's such a beautiful like sentiment, like to hear from your wife. It's like I don't want to eat food made by angry people anymore. Me neither. Gosh, me neither. Yeah, I love that.
There is a documentary, and I can't recall the name, but I think it's on YouTube because I watched part of it on YouTube. And it's about basically, and now I might lose some people because this might sound a bit too woo-woo, but it's rather scientific, and there's some Austrian scientists involved in the documentary, so I'm more comfortable speaking about it. But it's basically what you can do to food, and some of the studies is based on water, and basically what you can do to water and what that does to your body afterwards. And it's not about changing the water as such. It's just about looking at a glass of water and being intentional in terms of the emotion you're projecting on the glass of water. And then they can scientifically show that there are certain changes happening inside the glass. And that might sound extremely woo-woo for people, but then I will also ask everybody, it's like, does the air between you and me connect us or divide us? Like, there's obviously more between us than what the eye can see. And lately and now it gets really interesting. Lately I've been contemplating about kind of what's going on in my gut microbiome. And the other day I was in a stadium, and then I was wondering, I'm wondering if in my gut microbiome, they have something like a structure that equals the experience of a stadium, because for the planet, I'm just like, something that goes on in my body on a smaller scale. And, obviously that's where you lose people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like a microcosm. Yeah.
Yeah. I have like billions of small creatures inside of myself, just like there are now this week 8 billion people on this planet, and if you zoom out of the planet, you don't see them, you just see that kind of blue crust. And so I think, before I'm going too far out here into space world, I think there's a lot that's happening there that we don't quite understand. But I think if we're tuning in, if we're somewhat conscious, it's available. We can sense it. We can sense when people like you put their heart and soul into the food, just like that women, that you cooked for 6 years did, and just like the family you're cooking for feels it right now. And that's something that I hope you will always remember, that you don't need some title given by some tire company to you. You're definitely a chef. You're nurturing people, and you're a woman that stands in her own right, and I want to appreciate you for that. And and I'm so happy we had this entire conversation, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time.
Me too. Yeah, thank you so much. We touched on so many different things, different levels of woo-woo. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks again. This was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, this was like really lovely and very unexpected. I wasn't like, I had sort of an idea of maybe what I was going to come on and talk about, but so many things came up that I would never have thought that like we would be discussing. But they're all like so relevant, there's just so many different, we could continue for like so many more hours. I'm sure there's just so many different aspects of like this industry and this life. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Private Chef podcast. If you know any highly skilled chefs that want to take their life to the next level, make sure to share this podcast with them. And if you enjoyed this episode, click subscribe and check out our upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.